For some context, I'm Jack, a 36-year-old IT consultant, and I've been married to Sarah, 34, for almost 9 years. We have 2 kids, Ethan, 7, and Lily, 5. When we first met, Sarah was everything I thought I wanted. Confident, smart, and ridiculously charming. Looking back now, though, maybe I was just blinded by her charisma. Over the past year, things had started to feel off. Sarah became more distant, spending less time with me and the kids, and more time working late or meeting up with friends. At first, I didn't think much of it. She's always been social, and I figured she just needed some space. But as time went on, the excuses started to pile up, and her behavior became harder to ignore. The little things added up. Hiding her phone, coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine, and suddenly being overly protective of her social media accounts. I even caught her giggling at texts late at night and brushing it off as just something funny from work. That's when the gut feeling hit me. Something was wrong. Really wrong. Still, I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to think we could work through whatever was making her pull away. But the signs were there, and the truth was just waiting to smack me in the face. It wasn't long before it did, and when it came, it was worse than I ever imagined. I'll never forget the night I found out. It was a Tuesday, one of her gym nights, but she came home dressed a little too nice for a workout. Tight black dress, perfect makeup, heels. She looked stunning, but the outfit screamed date night, not yoga class. She barely acknowledged me, muttered something about being tired, and went straight to the shower. Something snapped in me that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played. So, I decided to trust my instincts and check her phone. Sarah had always been careful, but that night, she slipped up. Her phone wasn't locked, and a message popped up right as I picked it up. It was from someone named Mike, a guy I vaguely remembered her mentioning as a coworker. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about tonight. You looked incredible. Wish you were still here with me." My heart dropped. I scrolled up and found weeks' worth of messages. Flirty texts, inside jokes, and some very inappropriate photos that she had sent him. The timestamp on the last message? While she was at the gym. My hands were shaking as I kept reading. They'd been meeting up in hotels. He was married too. It was like a punch to the gut. Then I found the cherry on top. A booking confirmation for a hotel room this weekend, under her name. That was when I knew this wasn't some random fling or misunderstanding. This was a full-blown affair, and she didn't even care enough to hide it well. I felt like an idiot. All those nights she worked late or needed space, I was home feeding our kids dinner, giving them baths, and reading bedtime stories while she was out living some double life. The betrayal was unreal, but the more I read, the angrier I got. This wasn't just about cheating, it was the blatant disrespect. She had no idea I'd found out, but I wasn't going to stay in the dark for long. The rage bubbling inside me told me one thing. It was time for her to face the music. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. Sarah was her usual dismissive self, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I was dying inside, but I wasn't about to let her see it. Not yet. I needed a plan, and I needed her to slip up just a little more. By Friday, she had no idea I was onto her. That night, she casually told me she was meeting the girls for dinner and might be home late. I nodded, smiled, and even said, "Have fun, babe." Meanwhile, I already knew where she'd be, at the hotel with Mike. I had the booking confirmation, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I hired a babysitter for the kids and followed her. Sure enough, she drove straight to the hotel. I waited in the parking lot, watching her saunter inside like she didn't have a husband and 2 kids at home. My blood was boiling. I gave it 10 minutes, then walked into the lobby and asked for the room number under her name. Turns out, playing the concerned husband looking for his wife routine works wonders. When I got to the door, I didn't hesitate. I pounded on it until I heard frantic shuffling inside. A man's voice asked, "Who is it?" I didn't answer. I just kept banging. Finally, Sarah opened the door, her face going pale the moment she saw me. She tried to block my view, but it was too late. I could see Mike scrambling to grab his clothes in the background. He was shirtless, panicked, and exactly as pathetic as I imagined. "What the hell, Jack?" Sarah hissed, trying to push me back into the hallway. "You're embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" I laughed bitterly. "Sarah, you're in a hotel room with another man. Don't even try to play this off." Mike muttered something about leaving, but I wasn't done yet. "Oh no, Mike, stay right there. You might as well hear this too." I looked straight at Sarah. "I know everything. The texts, the pictures, the hotel bookings. You've been lying to me for months, and now you want to act like I'm the bad guy." Sarah's face twisted, and that's when the real Sarah came out. The cold, manipulative version I'd started to suspect was lurking underneath. "Well, maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need to find excitement elsewhere," she spat. "You're always at work or with the kids. I need more than that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No apology, no remorse. Just excuses and insults. "You've got some nerve, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I've been busting my ass to give you and the kids a good life. And this is how you repay me?" She rolled her eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Well, maybe if you weren't so predictable, I wouldn't have gotten bored. Mike actually listens to me." I turned to Mike, who was standing there awkwardly, holding his shoes like a guilty teenager. "You're married too, right? Wonder how your wife would feel about all this." He stammered something about it being complicated, but I cut him off. "Save it. You're both disgusting." Before Sarah could respond, I left. I wasn't about to waste another second on her pathetic excuses. But as I drove home, the rage inside me started to morph into something else. A plan. If Sarah wanted to act like I was disposable, I'd show her just how wrong she was. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, replaying Sarah's venomous words and that smug look on her face. She had no remorse, no shame. In her eyes, I was the problem. But I wasn't about to let her walk all over me like some doormat. If she thought I'd just roll over and accept her betrayal, she had another thing coming. That night, Sarah came home a little past midnight, acting like nothing had happened. She didn't even bother sneaking in, just walked through the door with her purse slung over her shoulder, her heels clicking against the floor. I was sitting in the living room, waiting. She froze when she saw me. "Why are you still up?" she asked, her tone dripping with annoyance. I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "Oh, just reflecting on my boring life. You know, the one you're so tired of." She rolled her eyes again. "Jack, I don't have the energy for this right now." "Don't worry," I said calmly. "You'll need all your energy for what's coming next." That caught her attention. She turned to face me fully, her arms crossed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, standing up, "I'm done playing the fool. You want to cheat? Fine. You want a divorce? Even better." Her eyes widened slightly, but I could tell she didn't believe me. "I'll have the papers ready by Monday," she scoffed. "Oh, please, like you'll actually go through with it. You're too soft, Jack. You need me." I walked past her, heading toward the bedroom, but stopped in the hallway. "You'll find out just how wrong you are, Sarah. Trust me." Over the next few days, I was a man on a mission. While Sarah carried on with her usual smug attitude, probably thinking she had me wrapped around her finger, I was working in the background. First, I visited a lawyer, a great one, recommended by a friend who'd gone through a messy divorce. We drew up a plan that would protect me and ensure I kept custody of the kids. Sarah wasn't exactly mother of the year, and I had plenty of evidence to prove it. Next, I opened a separate bank account and transferred the bulk of our savings into it. I wasn't about to let her drain our funds when she inevitably realized I wasn't playing around. Then, I started gathering every piece of dirt I could find. Her texts with Mike, her hotel bookings, even photos of her neglecting the kids while she was out gallivanting. By the time I was done, I had a rock-solid case. Meanwhile, Sarah was blissfully unaware. She thought I was sulking, nursing my wounded pride. She didn't realize I was about to pull the rug out from under her. When Monday rolled around, I handed her the divorce papers. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Dead serious," I replied. "You wanted a divorce, Sarah. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for." At first, she laughed, like it was some kind of joke. But when she saw my expression, the color drained from her face. "You can't do this to me, Jack." "Oh, I can. And I am." I leaned in, my voice low but firm. "You made your choices, Sarah. Now you're going to live with the consequences." Let me know if you're ready for the next part, where the true fallout begins, and Sarah realizes exactly what she's lost. First, Sarah tried to brush it off, pretending she didn't care. "Fine," she said, tossing the divorce papers on the counter. "If you think you're so much better off without me, go ahead." She even smirked like she still thought she held all the cards. But the thing about people like Sarah is they only play tough until reality hits. And when it did, it hit her like a freight train. I didn't wait for her to make the first move. I filed the papers the same day and moved fast. I blocked her access to the joint account, changed all the passwords to our streaming services, and even started boxing up her things. It wasn't about being petty. It was about showing her that I was serious. If she wanted freedom, she was going to get it, but not on her terms. First, she acted like it was no big deal. She spent the next few days out of the house, probably staying with Mike. She'd come home late at night, barely say a word to me or the kids, and leave again the next morning. But little cracks started to show. I could see the confusion and frustration in her eyes every time she realized she couldn't swipe her card or log into her accounts. And then came the real turning point. One night, she came home while I was tucking the kids into bed. Ethan had a fever, and Lily was cranky after a long day. I'd just gotten them both settled when Sarah waltzed in, her hair and makeup perfect, like she just stepped out of a club. She barely glanced at the kids and went straight to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. I followed her. "Long night?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. She sighed dramatically. "What do you want, Jack?" "Nothing," I said, smirking. "Just wondering how Mike's doing." Still sneaking around behind his wife's back. Her head snapped up, and for the first time I saw panic in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, don't play dumb, Sarah. I've got his wife's number. Thought she might want to know what her husband's been up to." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Try me," I said, my voice ice cold. "You wanted a divorce, remember? You thought you could trade me in for a shiny new toy and everything would work out perfectly. Newsflash, Sarah. Life doesn't work like that." The next day, the real fallout began. Mike's wife, let's call her Lisa, was furious when I showed her the texts and hotel bookings. Turns out, Mike had been feeding her the same lies Sarah had been feeding me. Lisa kicked him out of the house that same day, and word got back to Sarah pretty quickly. When she came home that evening, she was livid. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, slamming the door behind her. "To you," I said, laughing bitterly. "You did this to yourself, Sarah. I'm just cleaning up the mess." Her confidence was cracking, and I loved every second of it. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Mike's wife kicked him out. "Now he's blaming me." "Good," I said, crossing my arms. "Maybe you'll both learn something from this." But she didn't learn. Instead, she doubled down, calling me every name in the book and accusing me of being a vindictive jerk. I just stood there, letting her rant. I didn't need to argue. She was digging her own grave, and I was happy to hand her the shovel. Sarah thought she was untouchable, but reality was closing in on her fast. After the blow-up about Mike, she spent most of her time sulking around the house or texting furiously on her phone. I could tell things weren't going well for her, and that's when I decided to make things just a little worse. Remember how I said I boxed up her things? I wasn't kidding. Over the next few days, I packed up everything she'd left scattered around the house. Clothes, shoes, her favorite vanity mirror, and neatly stacked the boxes in the garage. She finally noticed when she came home one night and found her closet half empty. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, pointing at the boxes. "Just getting a head start on the divorce," I said, not even looking up from my laptop. "Figured you'd want to take your stuff with you when you move out." Her jaw dropped. "Move out? I'm not going anywhere." "Oh, but you are," I said, leaning back in my chair. "The house is in my name, Sarah. You can stay for now, but once the divorce is finalized, you'll need to find a new place." She sputtered, trying to come up with a retort, but there was nothing she could say. The look on her face was priceless. This was the first time she realized she wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. And I wasn't done yet. The next bombshell came a few days later. Sarah had been dodging calls all morning, and I couldn't help but notice how stressed she looked. Eventually, she snapped at me, accusing me of making her life a living hell. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, feigning innocence. "Is this about Mike losing his job?" Her head whipped around. "What are you talking about? Didn't you hear?" I asked, unable to keep the smirk off my face. "Lisa sent all the evidence to his boss. Turns out most companies don't take kindly to employees using company funds to book hotel rooms for their affairs." Her face turned red, and I thought she might actually explode. "You had no right to do that," she yelled. "Funny, I don't remember asking for your permission," I shot back. "Besides, it wasn't me. Lisa's the one who pulled the trigger. Yes, you should have picked a partner who could keep his personal and professional lives separate." Sarah stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I could hear her pacing upstairs, muttering to herself. She was unraveling, and I wasn't about to stop her. By the end of the week, Sarah's perfect little world was in shambles. Mike had ghosted her completely. No texts, no calls, nothing. She tried to play it off, pretending she didn't care, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She was spiraling, and for the first time, she was starting to understand what she'd thrown away. One night, after the kids were in bed, she finally broke down. She stood in the doorway of the living room, arms crossed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Jack," she said quietly, "can we talk?" I didn't even look up from the TV. "What's there to talk about?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I messed up, okay? I made a mistake, but we've been together for so long. Don't you think we can work through this?" I turned to her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just some mistake, Sarah. This is months of lies, betrayal, and utter disrespect. You didn't just cheat on me, you destroyed the life we built together. And now that everything's falling apart, you expect me to pick up the pieces." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. "Not anymore. You wanted a divorce, remember? I'm giving you exactly what you asked for." By this point, Sarah's arrogance had crumbled. The woman who once strutted around like she owned the world now looked like a shell of herself. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It wasn't enough for her to feel regret. I wanted her to fully understand the magnitude of what she'd done. And I had the perfect plan to make sure she did. A week later, after filing all the necessary paperwork and ensuring my legal ducks were in a row, I decided it was time for the final act. Sarah was still living in the house, though barely. She spent her days holed up in the bedroom, avoiding the kids and sulking like a teenager. Meanwhile, I was keeping my cool, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came on a Friday evening. Sarah had just come downstairs, looking disheveled and defeated. She barely glanced at me before grabbing a glass of wine and collapsing onto the couch. "What's for dinner?" she asked flatly, as if nothing had happened. I smiled. "Oh, don't worry about dinner. I have something special planned." Her brows furrowed, but she didn't question me. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick text. 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Sarah perked up, clearly confused. "Who's that?" she asked. "Why don't you find out?" I said, leaning back in my chair. She opened the door, and there stood Lisa, Mike's wife. Sarah froze, her face turning ghostly pale. Lisa, on the other hand, looked fierce like a woman on a mission. "We need to talk," Lisa said, pushing past Sarah into the house. "What the hell is this?" Sarah sputtered, looking between the two of us. I stood up, keeping my voice calm. "It's simple, Sarah. Lisa and I have been comparing notes. Turns out, she had just as much to lose as I did, and she thought it would be a good idea to come by and have a little chat." Lisa wasted no time. "You destroyed my family, Sarah. Do you even realize that? Because of you, my kids have to grow up without their father in the house. And for what? A fling? Was it worth it?" Sarah looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she stammered. "Mike, he told me he wasn't happy. He said he wanted to leave you." Lisa laughed, a bitter sound that cut through the tension like a knife. "Oh, I bet he did. And you believed him? How naive can you be?" I stayed silent, letting Lisa do the heavy lifting. Watching Sarah squirm was satisfying enough. When Lisa finally stormed out, Sarah turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this to me?" she sobbed. "Haven't you punished me enough?" I crossed my arms, my voice cold. "You're the one who wanted this, Sarah. You wanted freedom, excitement, and a new life. Well, here it is. Enjoy it." The final blow came the next morning. I handed Sarah an envelope as she sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her coffee. "What's this?" she asked warily. "Consider it my parting gift," I said, walking away. Inside was a list of everything she'd lost. The house, primary custody of the kids, half of our savings, since most of it was now safely in my account, and, of course, her reputation. Attached was a copy of the affidavit I'd prepared, detailing her affair and its impact on our family. It was a brutally honest account of her actions, meant to be presented in court if she dared to challenge the custody agreement. She came storming into the living room, clutching the papers. "You can't do this to me." I looked up, calm as ever. "Oh, I already did. You wanted a divorce, Sarah. I'm just giving you exactly what you asked for." For the first time, she didn't have a snarky comeback or a manipulative excuse. She just stood there, defeated, as the weight of her choices finally came crashing down around her. Sarah didn't say much after that. The once confident, manipulative woman who thought she had it all figured out was now just lost. She shuffled around the house for a few days, probably hoping for a miracle. But there wasn't one coming. I was done. The divorce was in motion, the custody arrangements were secure, and my revenge was complete. There was nothing left for her to fight for. By the following week, she moved out. She didn't have much of a choice. Her credit cards were maxed out, her reputation in shambles, and Mike, her so-called escape from our marriage, was nowhere to be found. Lisa had kicked him to the curb, and from what I'd heard, he wasn't exactly eager to build a new life with Sarah. He'd ghosted her completely. The kids didn't seem to miss her much, which hurt me more than I expected. I tried to shield them from the chaos, but even kids as young as Ethan and Lily could sense when something wasn't right. I did everything I could to keep their routine normal, helping with homework, packing lunches, reading bedtime stories. They needed stability, and I was determined to give it to them, even if it meant putting my own feelings aside. In the quiet moments, after the kids were asleep and the house was still, I allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back. The anger, the sadness, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, it all came flooding in. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted with my life, turn around and destroy everything we'd built together? And for what? A cheap thrill? A fleeting sense of excitement? I won't lie, there were nights when I questioned everything. Was I not enough? Did I fail as a husband? Could I have done something differently? But then I'd remember her lies, her excuses, the cold, calculated way she tried to manipulate me even after I caught her. And I'd realize this wasn't my fault. This was her choice, her mistake, her loss. In a strange way, the betrayal taught me something valuable. It showed me how strong I could be when I needed to be. It reminded me that I deserved better. Not just for myself, but for my kids. I wasn't going to let Sarah's selfishness define me or my future. I had too much to live for, too much to fight for, to let her drag me down. And as much as it hurt, I also learned to let go. Holding on to the anger, the bitterness, it wasn't worth it. Sarah was no longer my problem. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. My focus was on my kids, my career, and building a life that made me happy. A life that didn't include her. Now that the dust has settled, I can look back on everything with a sense of clarity I didn't think I'd ever have. The storm is over, and while the damage Sarah caused is undeniable, I've come out of it stronger, wiser, and ready to move forward. The biggest lesson I learned is that trust is everything in a relationship. Once it's broken, there's no going back. Not without true accountability and remorse, which Sarah never showed. A marriage is supposed to be a partnership, built on mutual respect and love. The moment one person decides their desires are more important than the promises they made, the foundation starts to crumble. And that's exactly what happened here. Another thing I learned is the importance of self-respect. For months, I made excuses for Sarah's behavior, convincing myself that things would get better, that she was just going through a phase. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I should have trusted my instincts sooner. If you're in a situation where your partner is disrespecting you, lying to you, or making you feel less than you deserve, don't ignore it. Confront it head-on. You owe that to yourself. As for advice, here's what I'd say to anyone going through a similar nightmare. Don't ignore the signs. If something feels off, it probably is. Trust your gut, but don't act impulsively. Gather evidence if you need to. It'll save you a lot of trouble later. Stay calm and calculated. When I first found out about Sarah's affair, I wanted to explode. But losing your temper gives them the upper hand. Instead, I kept my cool, planned my moves, and made sure I was in control of the situation. Protect yourself. Whether it's your finances, your home, or your kids, make sure you're taking steps to secure what's yours. Consult a lawyer, document everything, and don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Know your worth. It's easy to blame yourself when someone betrays you, but their actions are not your fault. Cheating is a choice, a selfish, destructive one, and it says more about them than it ever will about you. Move forward, not backward. It's tempting to cling to what's familiar, even if it's toxic. But staying in a broken relationship will only prolong the pain. Letting go is hard, but it's also the first step toward healing. As for Sarah, I heard she's been bouncing between friends' couches, trying to piece her life back together. Mike never took her back, and from what Lisa told me, his career is in shambles. Karma, as they say, has a funny way of working things out. Meanwhile, I'm doing better than I ever thought possible. The kids and I are thriving. I've thrown myself into my work, found new hobbies, and even started seeing someone who actually respects and appreciates me. Life is far from perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better without Sarah dragging me down. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It's painful, yes, but it's also an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to build a better future. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve a partner who sees that. And to Sarah, if she ever reads this, you wanted a divorce, and I was more than happy to give it to you. Now, I hope you realize exactly what you lost, and why you'll never get it back.